It is Big Church Sunday, and so we are excited to have our elementary kids in the room. I think when we came up with that name, I was like, man, this takes me back to like Baptist church days and kind of doing children's sermon and then going off. And so getting to go to Big Church. So we're excited to have you guys in the room. And I want to do things a little interactively this morning. And I want to start off with a question. And you don't need to answer this out loud, but the question I want us to start out with is this question of, do you know what it means for something to be of infinite worth? For something to have infinite value? And a way I want to get into this is I want to show you a series of pictures of cars. My boys are really into cars. And so I want you to tell me, you can call it out, what you think this car is worth or what this car goes for. All right, so the first car here is the clunker. Anybody going to pay any money for this? It said it runs well. All right, next one, smart car. What do you think that goes for? Anybody? 9,000? How much? 5,000? So we're looking in the range of 10 to 15,000 on the smart car. All right, next we're going to go to the Honda Accord, sensible car. 35,000? Somebody's been doing their shopping lately. Yep, right in that range of 30 to 35,000. All right, now we're going to up it a little bit. Corvette CR1. How much?
85.
How much? 85, a little higher. 100, higher. A little bit too high. It's right at 175,000, so right in that range. So bumped it up a notch. And then the last one is a car that I... I love it. Honestly, I remember these being a big deal when I was a kid, but I have not thought about them in a long time. But my boys have started talking about them. A Bugatti. Other guesses about how much this car goes for? How much? 2.5? $500,000? 4.2? 12? This car retails for $5 million. They made 99 of these, and they all were pre-ordered. I'm like, what in the world? All right. So this car, $5 million. Now imagine a car of infinite worth. What would that have to be in order to be of infinite worth? So rare, so wonderful, so beautiful, so powerful, whatever it is, to be a car of infinite worth. Well, the reality is a car cannot be of infinite worth. Nothing material can ultimately be of infinite worth. But there is one thing that can be of infinite worth that we're going to talk about this morning. And to get into that, we're going to do that by continuing our series in the Gospel of John. This series that we're calling The Word Made Real, Meeting Jesus in the Gospel of John. And we're looking at this idea of how Jesus becomes real in people's lives. To understand what it looks like for Jesus to become real in our lives. And so we're going to look at the story of another person who is in some unique circumstances meeting Jesus and learn what that tells us about meeting Jesus for ourselves today. So the story starts out, Jesus goes up to a festival in Jerusalem. And in verse 2, it tells us, by the sheep gate in Jerusalem, there is a pool called Bethesda in Aramaic, which has 5 colonnades. So he's going up by this pool, and one of the cool things about this pool is they have excavated this pool, and this is a model of it. There have actually been things built in it in the different eras of history, but this is a model of what this would have looked like, and they know exactly where this was. You can go and see it and visit it, but it's a historical place. Verse 3, it says, within these lay a large number of the disabled, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been disabled for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and realized he had already been there a long time, he said to him, do you want to get well? So let me give you some context. Why are these folks here? What is it about this pool? Well, there was a belief that this pool had healing power. And in fact, more specifically, they believed that an angel would come down and stir this water, and the first person to get in the water after it was stirred would be healed. And so Jesus comes up to this pool, he sees this man, and Jesus asks what for many of us seems like a peculiar question, a strange question. He asks the man, "Do you want to get well?" And many of us hear that and we think, duh, of course I want to get well. What is Jesus implying here? It's like with school. Do you want to get good grades? Yes. The question is not, do I want to get good grades? It's, can I get good grades? So why is Jesus asking such an obvious question? Well, there's a couple of thoughts about this. Some think that Jesus was possibly questioning if this man was trying hard enough. Like if he had been laying here for a long time, surely at some point he could have made his way to the front of the line and been the first into the water. Others think maybe Jesus was suggesting that he had gotten comfortable with being disabled. That being disabled, he would have begged for a living, and so he wouldn't know what to do if he couldn't beg, if he had to get a job. And so does he even really want to get well? Some think Jesus is asking here. But I think something else entirely is going on, and something that I think is much more in line with who we know Jesus to be. Jesus knew something that is often, I think, easy for us to forget, something that we easily lose sight of, and that is that the one thing in all of creation that does have infinite value is people, humans. And that value doesn't change because of how we look. It doesn't change because of how smart we are or how much money we make or how many people know us. Maybe in school, you're in school and there's competition for who has the most expensive shoes. It doesn't change your value if you have the most expensive shoes or the cheapest, the most expensive clothes or the cheapest. It doesn't change if you have the biggest house or no house, the college degree or no college degree. And it certainly does not change because someone has a disability. Human beings are of infinite worth, not because of anything that we can or cannot do, anything that we possess or do not possess. We are of infinite value because the book of Genesis tells us that we were created in the likeness of an infinite God. We are of infinite value not because of anything we accomplish or prove about ourselves, but because we reflect a God who is of infinite worth. And so to be of infinite worth, that question we started out with, what does it mean to be of infinite worth? To be of infinite worth is to be made in the image of an infinite God. Think about it this way. When I think about my kids, they tend to have these arguments about things, and ultimately, like, the winner is whoever gets to infinity first, right? And so if you think about God as being worth infinity dollars, okay, it's a bit crude, and we as humans carry even a fraction of that because we carry his image. A fraction of infinity is still infinity. So what does this have to do with Jesus' question to this man? Well, let's go back to our cars for a moment. Let me ask you, how are you going to treat a $5 million Bugatti? Right? Are you going to treat it the same as the clunker? No. You're going to be a little more careful around it, right? You're going to be a little more respectful. You're going to be thinking about what you're doing around this, because getting a scratch on that is not going to be a $30 fix. It's going to be a $100,000 fix, all right? So we're going to be careful about it because of its worth. As a human being who is created in God's image and reflects God's infinite worth, Jesus treats this man according to this man's infinite value. And in so doing, Jesus affirms this man's infinite value. And so as we look at this story this morning, I want to look at 3 ways that Jesus affirms this man's infinite value or infinite worth. The first thing here in verse 6, it says, Jesus saw him lying there. The first way that Jesus affirms this man's worth is that Jesus sees him. Our temptation as humans can be to see someone like this man as less valuable because of his disability. Less valuable to us personally or to our society. We can also begin to assume that we know what they need, what's best for them, and we can even act towards them without their permission because we think we know what is best. To kind of bring this home a little bit, this man being disabled most likely would have depended on the generosity of others for his provision, for food, water, shelter. And we have folks in our community who, for a variety of reasons, also depend on the generosity of others for their well-being. Another community of folks that I think we can assume that we know what they need or assume that we know what is best for them, but also a community who we can fail to recognize that they too carry the image of God and are of infinite worth, and that is the homeless or the unhoused in our community. Many of you know we've been partnering with Housing for New Hope, and one of the service projects that we do with them is to pack these bags that help people prepare to move into a home or simply to give out at an intersection where someone is standing. And I tend to think about, when we're packing these, I tend to think about the material supplies, the physical supplies that we're putting in there. But Housing for New Hope has also encouraged us to really think about the importance of including a note or a letter. And the reason that they encourage that is because of how easy it can be for folks in our society who maybe we see as lacking value or as being invisible. It's easy for folks to begin to believe that that is true about themselves. That they don't have value, that they are invisible. And so the power of a note or a letter is that it offers human contact, a recognition of their personhood and a reminder of their value. My temptation, I think at times when I pull up to an intersection and I don't have anything to give is to not look at them, right? Because if I don't look at them, I don't see them, I don't think, I don't have anything to give. But one of the things that I've come to understand through this is that simply the effort of making eye contact, of offering a wave, is a reminder we're both human. And they deserve the dignity of that acknowledgement. What Jesus does in meeting this man that's far more significant than healing him is that Jesus affirms this man's infinite worth. Another way to say that is that Jesus affirms his dignity. The civil rights activist and pastor John Perkins writes that oftentimes in our efforts at charity, we think of ourselves as giving people dignity. But he explains that we don't give people dignity, we affirm it. It's something that's already true and in them. And so in this story, Jesus could have withheld eye contact. He could have ignored him to avoid having to deal with him, and it would have only reinforced his sense of invisibility. But instead, Jesus sees him, and it offers him and affirms his dignity. And so the first thing that we learn about meeting Jesus today is that when we meet Jesus today, he doesn't disgrace us, he dignifies us. I think for some of us, we think of this idea of meeting Jesus, and we've resisted meeting Jesus because we think it means, well, then I'm just going to have to be told how awful I am and be told what a failure I am. But I think this shows that what Jesus wants to do is, in fact, to affirm our dignity, affirm our infinite worth. The second thing that Jesus does to affirm this man's infinite worth is in verse 6. He says, "Do you want to be well?" And I mentioned a couple of ways that people have read this, but I think what's really going on here is that Jesus affirms this man's infinite worth and his dignity by asking permission to heal him. Jesus affirms this man's capacity to know what is best for himself. Jesus also recognizes his infinite value and that Jesus can't just go and do things to his body without his permission, even if it's what we take to be a wonderful thing like healing. To go back to our Bugatti one more time, you don't just go up to somebody's filthy Bugatti and start washing it just because it's dirty, right? at least because you don't want to pay to repair something if you scratch it. You don't just walk up to somebody's expensive car and begin to wash it. With Jesus, he recognizes this man's autonomy. He recognizes this man's infinite worth and his dignity, and doesn't just act on it because he knows what's best. The man answers Jesus in the best way he knows how. Verse 7, "Sir," the disabled man answered, "I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I'm coming, someone goes in ahead of me." We see here that this man clearly has no idea who he is talking to, and seems to understand that his best chance at healing is to get into this water. And so we see the man doesn't answer Jesus directly, but he still signals his desire is to be healed. And Jesus' response to this is not to announce that he has been healed, but rather we see in verse 8, he says, "Get up," Jesus told him, "pick up your mat and walk." The third way that we see Jesus affirming this man's value is that Jesus invites him to participate in his own healing. Jesus could have been like, "Voila, you're healed, you're welcome." And this man in that would have become an instrument of Jesus' self-aggrandizement. And yes, I think we are supposed to be instruments of glory for God, but the emphasis here is not on Jesus. The emphasis is on the partnership with this man as one who carries the infinite worth of God. And so what we learn about meeting Jesus is that when we meet Jesus, Jesus elevates us or restores us to partnership with him. That our journey of healing is one that we enter in with him. That the work that we do with him is not just him coming and bringing his kingdom, but he invites us to participate in the bringing of his kingdom, of bringing justice to our world. And so what this man meets in meeting Jesus is the Word through whom he was created. We talked about how John talks about God creating with his Word. And this was the Word through whom he received his original dignity and who bears God's image. And in this story, Jesus is the same God who now affirms the dignity that remains in him regardless of his physical condition. As we bring this to a close, there's a story that I wanted to share with you, a story that maybe you have heard before, but it's this wonderful children's book by Max Lucado called "You Are Special." Maybe you've heard of it, but in this story, the book tells the story of a wooden puppet named Punchinello. And Punchinello lives in a village of wooden people called the Weemics, who are all created by a woodcarver named Eli. And in this Weemic village, the inhabitants spend their days placing gold stars or gray dots on each other. Gold stars are given to those who are beautiful and talented and accomplished, and gray dots are given to those who are clumsy and unattractive or make mistakes. And in the story, what we see is that Punchinello is unfortunately one who receives many gray dots and he begins to believe that he isn't worth much. One day he meets a Weemic named Lucia who has neither stars nor dots. And what he comes to learn is that these stickers simply do not stick to her. And so he becomes curious and inspired about, why do these not stick to you? And she tells him that he needs to go see Eli, the woodcarver. When Punchinello goes and visits Eli, he learns something that is life-changing for him. He learns that he is special not because of what others think of him, but because Eli made him and loves him. And so Eli reminds Punchinello that the stickers only stick if he lets them. And that the more he believes in Eli's love, the less he'll care about the opinions of others. When we meet Jesus, we learn that no one else's opinion of our value matters but his. This morning, as you come in this space, a part of what we're doing is we're coming and meeting Jesus. And I don't know if you come with lots of gray dots. You find yourself discouraged, beginning to believe the statements that it seems to suggest about your worth. Or maybe you come and you have spent your life trying to get gold stars, and it's exhausting. Part of the invitation to meeting Jesus is to be reminded that our infinite worth is not in anything that we can prove about ourselves, but it is being made in his image and loved by him. Punchinello learns of this by going and spending time with Eli. And that the more time he spends with this woodcarver, the less he'll care about the opinions of others. And so what I want to do is I just want to create some space now for us to come and meet with Jesus. We're going to have our prayer team available at the sides if you want someone to come and pray over you to remind you of this truth. But I want to invite you now to just bow your heads and pray with me as we just take a moment to be in God's presence, to meet Jesus, to have our infinite worth affirmed and to be reminded of its truth. Jesus, we thank you that you come and meet us in this space. And God, whether we are carrying dots or living under the oppression of continuing to seek after stars, God, may we come and just be reminded that our value is something that is in us because you created us in your likeness. Jesus, would you come and meet us in these moments?